Hi, my name's Arman, and you're listening to Tiny Synths and Friends. Let's explore the curious world of tabletop music devices designed by individuals with a deep desire to create something personal. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Maarten from Cheerful Electronic in the Netherlands, creator of a series of sound modules that use vintage Yamaha sound chips from the 1980s. Let's take a listen. Hello, Maarten. Welcome to the show. I'd like to start by asking you how you became interested in music.
I've always been interested in music, but to be totally honest with you, I'm not a great musician. I know a lot about the technology behind it, but really playing music and making music for myself, that was something that at an early age already, I decided it's something in my brain that seems to be missing here. You know, I had like two music lessons when I was really young because I wanted to learn the instrument. And everyone had to start with the flute or the recorder to get started. And immediately after the first lesson, I was like, yeah, this is not for me. I want to play piano or I want to play drums. I want to do something cool. I don't want to be stuck with the flute. So I gave up on it, but got interested in computers and did a little bit of programming from a very young age. So that's where I got started in making all kinds of weird noises and programming my own sounds a bit. Later on, learning a bit of piano, did a little course, but after a year I gave up. So it's always kind of, now the new year is right around the corner. It's always like, for next year, one of my New Year resolutions is going to be to really learn to play. But so far it hasn't happened yet. So maybe next year I will pick up playing piano again and start really learning.
When you say you kind of switched from musical instruments to a computer, what was your first computer?
My first computer, I don't think it's really well known in the States. But the first computer that I used was an MSX1. So it's a home computer from the 80s. This one was made by Philips, and it's a bit like the Commodore 64. So you switch this thing on, and you get a basic prompt. So you have to program something in order to use it. And we had these manuals with the computer that would give you little programs that you could type in, and you could try them out. And to me, as a young boy, it was just really interesting that you could just type in a little program and you could show something on the screen or you could make a sound. So if you knew how to write your code, you could basically make this machine do anything that you wanted. And that was just magical to me. And from there, I started to do my own little graphics, my own little tunes. And that's how I got started with my interest in technology.
So when you were programming graphics and tunes, I'm assuming the MSX had some kind of sound capabilities. Pretty limited, I imagine.
Very limited, yes. Yeah, it had I'm not sure the actual number, but it's this GI sound chip. I think it's the same as in some of the Atari machines that nowadays some people are using to make chip tunes. But also it had this capability with some of the games that you would get on the cartridge, that there was a special sound chip in the cartridge. And it was also a quite interesting one. I think it could take very tiny samples of just a few bytes, but it would greatly expand the musical capabilities of this machine. So I know that games like Space Mambo from Konami, and the original Metal Gear. They had quite a nice soundtrack on that machine, even though, the stock sound chip in there was pretty miserable.
Were you ever able to leverage that external chip in anything you were doing, or was that more like for a developer?
No, that's for developer. I think that thing is quite complex, but it's something that I still want to investigate how that thing works, and maybe mess around with it someday.
So my only experience with the original Metal Gear on the Nintendo Entertainment System was that I basically died very quickly and very early in that game repeatedly. So there was a version of it for the MSX. Was it monochrome or did it have color?
No, it had color. So you had different versions of the MSX. What I had was an MSX1 computer, but a few years later you had an MSX2, and that got a bit closer to an Amiga. So you had 256 colors, you had a floppy drive, those kind of things. But it was never a great success outside, I think, Japan, the Netherlands, and Brazil, and a few other countries. So it never got really big. It was meant to be this big standard like the PC was. But I think once Microsoft was backing it, they backed out. I think it's kind of went by the wayside. There was just, I think, Panasonic or some other manufacturer in Japan left producing these machines. So that was kind of the end of it.
Is there anything particularly memorable from that time period that you kind of look back on and go, I wish I could still load that up? Any project from that time? Or is it still sitting behind you somewhere at your desk?
Well, recently, last few years, I started looking around for that machine again. So in the attic, I have the original setup that we had at home when I was a kid. So the old Philips MSX with the monochrome screen and the cassette tape to load in the programs and a few additional games. So I can still program it a bit, but I've forgotten many things, and I don't have the original tapes that we had when I was young with all the little games. But then again, it's so much better that these days we don't have to sit around and wait for 5 minutes to listen to a game or a program load for 10 minutes and making these horrible cassette screeching noises at you.
I remember those sounds. I kind of miss them. Even the sound of loading from the disk drive is like, there were patterns that the drive would be spinning in that I can vaguely remember.
The kind of servo noises.
Yeah, exactly. When did you start getting interested in making music devices?
I got interested about 10 years ago. I was visiting some kind of fair in Belgium, and I ran into a book from Make magazine that was talking about making your own synthesizer. So I picked it up, and I was interested in it. So I got through it, started to put together some of these little circuits. So I would have like a little VCO or a little filter that I could play around with, and that was it. And a little bit later, I don't know how I got it, but I ended up having this OPL2 chip and a little DAC that goes along with it. I thought maybe I can make something with it. It didn't seem too complicated on the hardware side when I was looking it up. So I plugged it into a breadboard, and then it turned out that the software was quite a bit more complex because there were just a lot of registers that you had to set, and you had to know what each and every one of them was doing. So kind of pushed it to the side for a long time, and eventually got back into it when I found out that you could send these raw register dumps that DOSBox would make. You could put them into your little Arduino program, and that way you could control the chip without really knowing what you were doing.
So DOSBox is a PC application that allows modern machines to run old games. So you're saying that like integration between DOSBox on someone's PC and your external device was kind of an important key there.
That was an important key, yeah. Just to grab the raw capture of the OPL data and just getting a small piece of that and putting it into the code of the Arduino. That allowed me to play back parts of the background music from the Biomenace game. And that, well, was kind of my proof of concept that I can make this thing work on a breadboard, and I can mess around with it. Now I just need to figure out what each of these registers is doing, and I can figure out how I can make my own tunes, how I can make my own instrument patches, and how I can get complete control over this chip. So that's what then led to me making the OPL2 library for the Arduino.
And do you still work primarily in Arduino in that environment?
No, not anymore. It's just working with the Arduino IDE itself is just too cumbersome, and especially when you move to bigger projects like now OPL Studio, there's just no way that you're going to do this in this little IDE. So for OPL Studio, I'm using Platform IO as the basis, and I'm writing it all in Visual Studio Code. I'm also no longer using my own OPL2 library for it anymore. That's nice for the little OPL2 Audio Board and the OPL3 Duo, but for OPL Studio, it's just becoming too cumbersome. So that's all written from scratch.
Do you have any favorite soundtracks from that time that would highlight the OPL in that way?
Yeah, definitely. Games like Hocus Pocus, Mega Race, of course Doom, and I remember Fuzzy's World of Golf. They all have a great OPL2 soundtrack, so that's really the exact OPL sound that I really like.
So you started with the MSX in your childhood, and at some point you come across the Arduino environment. Was the OPL part of your past experience as well?
It was because there's quite a gap between the MSX years, and then later on, after my brother destroyed the computer, eventually we...
Oh, that sounds like a story right there.
Yeah. So my brother had a little handheld gaming console, a bit like the Game Boy. And on one day he figured out, hey, maybe I can plug one of these game cartridge. Maybe I can plug the cartridge into the MSX computer, and the game will show on the big screen. So he plugged in the cartridge, the magic smoke escaped, and yeah, that was the end of the MSX.
Wow, I can imagine some family drama there. You said he was using something like a Game Boy. What was it?
It was a Supervision, also not very. It's I think it's a Taiwanese console. It's a Game Boy clone. It was more cheap, but it also had this little monochrome screen and the same A/B button layout with a little D-pad.
Did most of your first customers for your breakout board come from people in the DOSBox world saying, I want to have a authentic soundtrack?
Yeah, exactly. That's where most of the people came from, and that's also when me and some other people, we started looking into adding support to DOSBox so that people could add the boards still with a little Arduino in between, connect it up and add it to the DOSBox configuration, so you could have the real OPL audio from the actual chip for both the OPL2 board and the OPL3 Duo board. So yeah, it's been added to DOSBox X for a while now, that you can put it into the configuration and have the real OPL play the music.
And so these original, your original breakout boards were sold as kits as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And what was the first thing you ever soldered?
What was the first thing that I ever soldered? That's a good question. That must have been some kind of school project. Yeah, I think I remember we had some kind of cricket noise thingy. You would put in a battery and it would have a little light sensor, and when it got dark, it started to make cricket-like sounds. I remember that we had to do that on some kind of field trip. putting it together and everyone playing with it in the bus on the way home.
So that would have been not a very fun bus ride, I don't think, for the bus driver.
Not for the teachers, no.
You started out making OPL breakout boards. Were you Cheerful Electronic at that point? How did you get your name?
Yeah, it's maybe an interesting story how that happened, because I already used the name Cheerful for many, many years. Almost more than 20 years now I use that name. It comes from the time around 2000, 2001, when everyone was getting their own Hotmail email address. So I also wanted to get my own email address, but of course, maarten@hotmail.com was already taken. And I didn't like to put in some random number at the end just to have my own email address. So I started looking around for other providers, and I found mail.com. And the special thing about mail.com was you could choose your own domain name for your email. So I was going through the list and I found cheerful.com. And Maarten@cheerful.com was not taken. So I took Maarten@cheerful.com for a while. And that's how the name, where the name comes from. And it kind of stuck. It didn't last very long because everyone was, all my friends were getting into MSN Messenger. So I also needed a Hotmail address. So after a few months, I ditched the email address, but the cheerful part, that stayed. And in 2005, I had the kind of a stroke of genius to also register the domain name here in the Netherlands. And that I did. So I don't think we can register something as simple as cheerful.nl these days anymore.
When you're developing these things, and I'm sure it's been different for each of the devices or the breakout boards that you've made, how many iterations do you generally go through when you're developing a piece of hardware?
Many. When I started with OPL2 board, there have been at least 3 different revisions before actually putting it on the Tiny store. First, it was just the OPL chip, the DAC, and the little op amp to produce the sound. So there was no amplifier on it yet. The clock circuit was part of the PCB. So over time, I added more and more stuff. You also have PCBs that just don't work. And with the OPL2 board in particular, I had a stroke of bad luck while I based the design on what turned out to be a fake chip that I got from China. So once I got to the real production, it didn't work. So I had to make yet another revision. And yeah, over time you learn. So after starting to sell the first batch of OPL2 boards, little changes, and you get feedback from people that you incorporate it into the design to make it better. You also have your own ideas that you put in, like having a separate line out and a separate amplified speaker out. So yeah, those things I put in, and that's how it grows over time until I reach a kind of maturity level for the PCBs that I'm happy with, and then it's final.
How do you know? How do you know when it's done and can be sold? That is a question I struggle with myself.
Yeah, that's a very difficult one. Looking back at the first iteration of the OPL2 board that I was selling, that's something that I absolutely, definitely wouldn't even consider to sell these days. I mean, not knowing any better is why I just have to still sell it. And I was like, yeah, there's no board like this out there yet. So I'll just try it, see what happens.
I think people listening that are wondering if they can do this, I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. Like, I know it was for me as I'm making these things. Like, well, do I have the experience to make a product that I can sell to someone else? And is it going to work right? And you struggle with this. And we also live in a time where it's almost as if people buy stuff with the expectation that it does things that it doesn't even do, and that it will somehow magically be updated and features will be added at a later point. And so, yeah, it's like, well, I guess it's okay to release something that isn't finished because many consumers don't expect it to ever be finished and to be constantly improved. I mean, the hardware, you can't really change after the fact. And then maybe some people don't understand that.
No, indeed. The hardware is set in stone. And that's also one of the more scary things for me when I first started to sell these things. I mean, would I even sell one? But then again, what happens if people are unhappy? What if things don't work? What if I sell a kit and I forget to put in half of the components, or one of the components is broken? What do I do if I get angry customers? That was a real big hurdle to overcome. But over time, my experience is that if you're just honest to people and think with them in how to solve the problems, then I never really had anyone really angry. People also think along with you. What I found is that even if people run into difficulties, maybe they made a mistake putting together a kit, or maybe something really is broken. That also happens sometimes. If you're just honest to people and think with them, give them a quick reply, they are still happy, and they come also with great suggestions on how to improve in the future. And I found many times that some of those people become some of your biggest promoters, even if they have been let down in the past, but you helped them out. So that was really surprising to learn that.
Yeah, I find in my experience, there's generally a handful of people that are really into what you're doing, and they're very, very, very helpful. And, when it comes to things like testing out new firmwares, I get feedback and I get ideas from people that I would have never thought to even try to use my device in this way. But this person seems to be having this problem that I would have never thought of.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's very, getting the ball rolling and getting something out there for people to use is just the beginning. So like thinking to yourself, oh, this is done, I can sell this. You're actually, if it's a certain type of product, it's actually just the beginning of that road.
Yeah, indeed.
So let's talk about the OPL Studio. When was that released?
It first was released in 2021. That was the first time that I released it. But that was after about 1 year, maybe 1.5 years of playing with the idea and trying a few things and having some prototypes that didn't work at all, or just were playing bad ideas. So that also went through quite a few iterations before there was something that I was reasonably happy with to be able to sell.
How would you describe the OPL Studio to someone that doesn't know what we're talking about here?
It's a very versatile mini FM synthesizer. So it's really interesting if you are into vintage games, like old DOS games. You can make your own patches, or you can play it into your bigger Eurorack synthesizer. It just gives you a lot of freedom to mess around with these synthesizer chips from the old Sound Blaster cards.
So looking at it, I have one here with me that I purchased from you. It's pretty big. It's about as big as maybe the largest tabletop synthesizer I have. It's in a case. The case is 3D printed. I'm assuming you're doing this. Are you printing them yourself? Like,
I'm printing them myself.
And it's rather large. How long does it take to print the main shell of this?
So the one that you also have, that was printed on a Prusa Mini. That would take all the parts about 8 hours to print in total. So it's quite a long time. But a few weeks ago, I upgraded to an MK4S, also Prusa. And then I can do it in 4 hours. So it's a real great time saver. That makes it more viable to print many cases.
So the case that I have is a sparkly, darker gray. It looks like it's printed in a couple of different pieces. And the main faceplate is a PCB. And it has, all of your controls. There's a touch screen kind of offset slightly to the left. It's a touch screen, and it comes with this stylus here. Is this a DS stylus? This looks like a stylus from a DS.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And
it's the same stylus.
And somehow you've made the tolerance of your 3D print perfect for this, and it just kind of pops in there and stays. Yeah, there's 3 knobs, an A and B control, a volume knob. There's an on-off switch, which is almost unheard of in this world of tiny synthesizers. And then a full-size headphone and audio out, line out, right? It's discrete line out and headphone separate.
Yeah.
5-pin MIDI jacks in and out, an SD card for saving data and loading, and then a micro USB that feeds into a teensy 4.1, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then on the front faceplate, I forgot to even mention, I don't like to use the M word very often, but it's got all the CV in and out on there, and then some activity lights. And yeah, the whole thing is just amazing. And I can tell that you have put a lot of time, and you must have a significant, a not trivial amount of experience 3D printing, because it looks like it comes together very smoothly. And
Well, it also takes many iterations to get that one correct. So there's a big garbage pile of broken prints before it got to this point where everything fits together.
I admire what you've done here. I think this is about as top level as anyone considering printing their own cases could achieve. It was much larger when I received it. It was bigger than, because I'm used to, tiny little devices, and this is my max, and but it's still great. I love it. When you're using the touchscreen on your device, there is like a tactile click. Is there like a relay inside there? What's going on with that?
No. There's a very tiny piezo speaker inside that makes a clicking sound.
And that is just for that sound, right?
That's just for that sound, and it can produce some beeps. So if you enable the trigger recording, it will beep to let you know that it's waiting for a MIDI input to start recording, and it can make some sounds during startup if there's really something wrong. But that's all it does. It's mainly for just the tactile feedback on the status.
Yeah, it's great. You can turn it off. I did find that setting, but I've left it on. I kind of enjoy it. So navigating through after the OPL Studio boots up, you're presented with what appears to be an operating system of the late 80s, early 90s, and it is very convincing. And this is all running on the Teensy, right?
It is.
It's very slick. It is very well thought out, and has, I think, even grown a little bit since I was looking at it. And then the time I bought it, I think you added in CC functionality layered in so that you can assign CC controls. And that was great, because that was what I was kind of hoping for. And when it arrived, it had that ability. So I was like, okay, that's great. But I would advise anyone curious about this to try and search out some videos online, because navigating through it, your vision of a menu structure or of sequencing, it has multiple sequencers, which you didn't mention when you were describing it. It's not only just the synthesizer.
Yeah.
There appears to be multiple ways to sequence in here. Like there's a more traditional linear sequencer, and then there's a drum sequencer. If someone had a time machine from, the mid-90s and could come forward to see this, it would probably just totally blow them away.
Yeah, indeed, it would probably blow their mind.
There's so much in here. I can't imagine. I mean, it looks like there's room for more icons. I can't imagine what they could possibly be for. It's just beautiful. How long did it take you to make that fake OS?
Well, that didn't take too long, actually, just to get the basics going. It was also all done during the COVID lockdown, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. So that's when I got the basics of the UI going and figuring out some of the more difficult things in C++, or how to get all the different events going. Once I had a solid basis, now it's quite easy for me to update it from time to time and to add little new application modules to it. So right now I'm in the process of giving the drum sequencer a big update, since it's already very old. I think I never made much changes since the first release of the software, so it's time that gets some update. The UI is now, after I think half a year of development, it took me to get to this stage to have all of the little UI elements in place, like the scroll bars and the windows and the buttons, checkboxes, all that stuff. And whenever I need something special, like some of the little graphs that you see for the ABSR envelopes or the waveforms, then I sit down to make the new UI component, and usually that takes like a couple of days to make.
So when you're working on something like this that seems much more open-ended than the original OPL modules, what kind of other devices do you test with? Do you have other keyboards or other sequencers that you're plugging in or testing to see how they interact?
So usually I use my my little Arteria MinLab 3 that I have over here. I also have a bigger keyboard at the other end of the room with all the separate MIDI controls to test it with. I have some self-built little VCOs that I can plug into the CV inputs to test with, and I do a lot of testing just by playing back MIDI files that I recorded over time with special events in them to see if everything works out. And it's something that that takes just a lot of time to get it right with the software to make sure that all my changes still work. And every release, I found that there's something that I forgot that needs to be patched. But it's like you say, it's an open-ended project, so that's something then for the next release to fix and to patch up.
And who does your website design and your manuals? I'm going to assume that you're creating all of this additional content for Cheerful.
I am, yeah. So I also made the website. That's some of the more shameful parts, because my regular daytime job is that I am more or less a web developer, while I don't spend a lot of effort on my own website. So it's all just plain HTML and I think just a little bit of JavaScript for the logo. But other than that, I really couldn't be bothered when I put it up. So it's also something that's always on my list to update the website. And now I'm updating the manual of OPL Studio, because that's also already really out of date. I think it's 1.1 or something like that. One now the software is 2.2. So it just takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to upgrade everything. But I have a certain standard of quality that I like to meet before I put something out there.
Are there any other things planned for a future firmware update for OPL Studio?
A lot. I have quite a list of things that I want to upgrade on it. So first the drum sequencer. There's also a very old composer module in there where you can put the different sequences together to make little songs. And that also deserves an upgrade, because it's also very old. And when I programmed that, I was keeping some silly limitations of the teensy in mind that just turned out to be playing ridiculous. So that's going to get an upgrade eventually. Also, what I want to do is to give you the ability to export the music that you make. So export it to MIDI, to VGM files, or video game music, or the DOSBox register dumps, so DRO files. That's something that I still have on my list. And I want to also get a little bit more out of the patches. For instance, I don't know if you are familiar with Attack Tracker. That program allows you to program little macros into the instrument definitions. So what that allows you is to change the parameters of an instrument as you play a note without having to send any additional MIDI control changes. So you can do the modulation from within the patch itself. And that's something that I also want to investigate, because I think that would also benefit for the drum sounds, to make them a bit nicer, because now they are often very, very shallow. So it would be nice if they can be a bit more thick sounding. I think that with some additional patch effects, that will really be achievable. And apart from that, there's lots of smaller changes that I still want to add there. It's maybe some UI tweaks or just some little improvements to make your life just a little bit easier once you're editing things.
What are some of your favorite sound making tools right now? I know you don't describe yourself as a musician as such, but I find sometimes I'm making these things for myself so that I can explore music in a way that I enjoy. Is that kind of what you're doing here, or do you have other devices you enjoy integrating into a setup?
Yeah, no, that's it. It's for myself to make my own music. It's why I also made it in a way that should be very easy for everyone to understand, because I'm also not a pro with all the different audio software. And apart from OPL Studio, I really enjoy playing around with trackers, whether it's older ones like Screen Tracker or Impulse Tracker, also Noise. I really enjoy playing around with that.
Are the OPL modules or the OPL Studio, are they open source? Are they out there on GitHub? How are they managed by you?
So the OPL2 board and OPL3 Duo, they are open source indeed. So anyone can have a look at the code, have a look at the schematic, and they can make their own. But for OPL Studio, it's on my private GitHub. There's no access, and that's not because I don't want to give away the code, but it's more that what I noticed with OPL2 library is that I get so many pull requests from people with very good intentions to add all these changes, and OPL Studio, the code is just too big, too complex to really put it out there, I think. So for now, I just keep it closed, and of course I do take many suggestions, and I always welcome them, and oftentimes they end up getting implemented, but I keep it closed source just for my own peace of mind, for my own sanity.
As you develop content like your manuals, your website, and even your firmware, how do you feel about AI and its relation to content creation?
For my regular daytime job, I sometimes use AI to answer some questions, or if I have a little JSON data, for example, and I need it to be transformed, or there is an issue with the data somewhere, I ask it, hey, just fix this for me. But yeah, it's not really something that I would want to use for really writing my code for me. What I do find interesting is to allow it to create images. That is interesting. I've been playing around with that, but I find it very difficult to come up with a good prompt that gives me the kind of results that I'm happy with. So it's not something that I'm going to use for my project on let's say a day-to-day basis. To let's say I need a new icon, and I ask the AI to give me this Windows 95 looking icon in 16 colors for me. No, I will just do that myself.
Is this as much of a topic in the Netherlands as it is in the States? Because here it's quite a bit of a, I don't know if it's a controversy, but people have a lot of thoughts on AI in creative fields or in content creation. And are people concerned about it there?
Yeah. People definitely are. I don't think it's as big a thing over here as it is in the US already. But you do often get warnings on like the news, like that AI is trying to manipulate you. And of course, we over here call it fabeltjesfuik. So this is this kind of funnel that you get dragged into. Like you watch a video on YouTube, and for the next few weeks, you will be recommended nothing else but that one topic. So yeah, there is concern about it, and I think the negative part of AI gets highlighted more than maybe the good parts of it. But it depends on who you ask, and I mean what kind of news programs you're watching on TV.
I guess it seems like I'm asking these questions a little bit out of left field, but I think they play heavily into this time where we have creators such as yourself that seem to be doing something that was almost impossible 20 years ago. Like you wouldn't find someone that could develop a piece of music hardware, have the PCBs manufactured, run prototypes, and write the firmware, develop the site, do all the like this just wouldn't be possible not that long ago. And AI is in the forefront of technology now as what many people perceive as a shortcut. And I don't think what you're doing, there's not very many shortcuts. And I think that's what I find to be important about people developing these devices, is that they're just, I imagine that you and others are working very hard. And yeah, sure, AI could maybe assist in certain elements, but it's almost counter to the whole concept of AI, whereas AI is at the point where you can just say, write me an electronic music pop song and it will spit one out in a matter of seconds. You're the antithesis of that.
Yeah. Well, in case of someone like me who isn't very musical, it would probably help me to make music. But in the creation of these devices, no, I don't think it would really be helpful. Maybe it can give some good hints to push you in a certain direction, give you some idea that you didn't think of yourself. But I wouldn't take it for granted to develop my code or do the PCB design or, I don't know, the STLs for the 3D print case. I'm not even sure if that's possible even at this point. Maybe it is in a few years.
Yeah, at this point, no. In a few years, probably.
And to be honest, I think that in a few years' time, it will actually be necessary because these OPL chips that I'm using, they are no longer produced. So eventually, stock is going to dry up, or the prices to buy these chips are going to be so ridiculous that you will just have to go the way of emulating everything in software.
So when you are scavenging for OPL chips, do you find a lot of like dead chips, or like I myself find chips that have had like the silk screen washed off and then, just total garbage.
With the OPL2 chips, that's always the case. I can say a few years ago, I would still get some batches of real genuine chips, but these days they're all rebatched. The OPL3s, I think they are still genuine, at least the ones that I have, because I bought a big batch last year. I think they are still the genuine ones, but I'm sure that they will also be rebatched for whatever reason.
Yeah, and the price, even in my own explorations of certain FM Yamaha chips I use, the price has already gone up. Just within 2 years, the price has doubled. So yeah, there's a pretty limited window for us here to grab these chips.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a very limited window, and yeah, I can understand why people are rebadging these chips. But yeah, I mean, then just be honest about it. Sell it as a part that's been refurbished, and don't sell it as new old stock. That's the least amount of effort that you can do to be at least honest about what you're doing. And yeah, I think in a couple of years' time, the prices are for the chips that I'm using are going to be at the level it's at the same level basically as the STIT chip from the Commodore 64. So really ridiculous prices. Then you're really not sure what you're getting when you buy them. So I think at that time I would start considering maybe going the way of emulation, as unfortunate as it is.
Yeah, there'll be no choice at some point.
Yeah.
Your boards, your PCBs look beautiful inside. I'm assuming you're doing at least some of the soldering.
No, in fact, I do all of the soldering on them.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. You're right, especially now that most of these PCB manufacturers can also do the assembly for you. But it's something that I haven't tried yet. Also because I'm using these custom chips, I'm not sure if they can get them. And if they can, I'm really not sure where they are going to get them and what quality they are going to get. Or maybe there's a deal where I have to send them a batch of my own chips for them to reassemble. So yeah, for now I'm doing everything from this little workroom that I have over here. So whenever I get an order or I have the time to work in advance, I just put on a podcast, I put on some music and start soldering.
I hope you have a good fan to suck the solder fumes away.
I have a good fan, and I have a good system to be my own pick and place machine, and reasonably quickly I can now put the components onto the board, and with a hot air gun I can solder everything in place. And then hopefully I've done my job right once I test it and everything works the first time. And from time to time you have to make some adjustments.
Do you ever perform music, or what is the electronic music scene like in the Netherlands? Do you see shows? Is there anybody out there that you're aware of that you're friends with or have heard of out there using this stuff?
At the end of September this year, I actually had my first own little performance, and it was at the Maker Night in Eindhoven. It's kind of the same as the Maker Fair. And during Maker Night, there were a few makers like myself who were showing off their creation at a concert hall, and we put up a little show to show off what we did. So I had my sequencer with a few sequences in there that I could play around with. There was one guy from the States who had a big drum robot that was making a lot of noise. There were guys from Studio Otto. They had a very nice sequencer set up for kids that you could push big buttons and it would make some very nice sounds. One guy who made some noises with a 3D printer and an electric guitar. So that was really cool. But most of these electronic music projects, it's kind of underground in the Netherlands. I think it's not something that I'm really aware of.
Making synthesizers can be challenging, but I feel like the rewards outweigh the craziness.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. It outweighs the craziness, and even doing this next to a full-time job, I think it's still worth it. I mean, it's still worth talking to all the different people from across the world who have their own ideas about how to use your project and what they want to do with it, and it's always very interesting to hear.
This has been Tiny Synths and Friends. Thanks to Maarten from Cheerful Electronic for spending some time with me on the show. And thank you for listening. Links to Cheerful Electronic's relevant social media, shop, and more are located in the description of this episode.